Alright guys, well this is the brake service for an '04 Acura MDX that I did. The customer requested brake pads and rotors all around. As customary with my services, I also did a fluid exchange. Um, we're starting off with jacking the car up using a Duralast 2.5, I'm going to say 2.5 jack. I might be wrong about that, but it's a small jack. Getting it up, making sure safety first. We put a jack stand underneath. If you need to, always put wheel chocks, making sure that the car won't roll forward or back depending on which one of the wheels you're using. Um, Once I have it set up, I'm making sure I have it near the pinch well or somewhere where, if it's going to drop, it's not going to hurt the car. Um, After that, you got to make sure, you have all the parts you need, always with the job. Uh, if the case is that you need a special tool or something, you want to make sure you have it at hand. In this case, there was nothing special, and I get my parts from Rock Auto just because they're cheap. It does take a while to come in, but it's worth it, for the price, and you get good quality parts. The customer, beforehand, I made sure that she gave me the wheel lock, and this is the wheel lock. I'm taking it out with my half-inch electric impact from Snap-on. Put the wheel aside, and now we're gonna get down to the stuff. Gonna be taking out some WD-40, some penetrating oil, whichever you prefer. I'm using WD-40 because it's what I had at hand. Making sure that the bleeder screw, we hit that first, and also the other bolts. We need to make sure that the bolts that are connecting the push pins are also oiled. It'd be better if you could do this overnight if you're doing it on your own personal car. That way in the morning they'll be a lot easier to take out, but it's always good to put some type of lubricant. You don't want to break anything while you're going at it. And the bleeder screw is actually essential for you to do it because, once it comes time to bleed the brakes, you don't risk the chance of breaking it, and then you're going to have to change the whole caliper. So to say, it's happened to me before. Now, here I'm getting all my tools. You always want to be organized. And I'm using my 3/8 small impact gun, and found the socket. We're going to be getting it off. And you always want to make sure that if you don't have the space to do it, sometimes you can use, maybe a swivel socket or something else. In this case, I didn't need to. But for the bottom, if I'm not mistaken, if you don't have the space that you might want, you might just need to get like a small breaker bar to be able to take it out. In my case, I just, use the gun, and now I'm taking out the whole caliper. If you need to, you might need to pry it. You get like a long screwdriver, a flathead, and get it out. And in my case, this process was kind of simple for this tire. And the other tire, the passenger rear, was a little more difficult. But this one was the first one, and it was fairly easy. I'm showing you guys over here. The brake pads, they were decent in the back, but the customer still wanted to be changed. So now we're gonna take out the pins. You can see all that dust that just came out when I'm pulling it out. So when you take them out, you want to make sure that you're careful with the boot. You don't want to rip the dust boot, because that's preventing dust from getting in there. Those are moving lubricated parts, so you will always want to be careful not to have anything that can contaminate it, or bits of dust that will get up in there. Now, as you can see, I don't have space to be able to put the gun in there, so I just take my 3/8 ratchet. It's a flex, snap-on flex ratchet, and I'm just gonna loosen it by hand. It's gonna take some muscle, but you just do it. Gonna take out the 2 bolts in the back and take out the bracket. So now we just have the rotor, and we could just pull it off. In some cases, you might need to bang it with like a little mini sledge, just because there's so much rust and they're forced on there. But for now, I just pulled it right off, smooth and easy, which is good. These are the parking brake shoes. I'm making sure that I'm cleaning it with some type of brake clean spray, just to make sure you get all the dust out of there. The shoes look good, but it'd be better if it's your car and you have the money to change them while you're at it. In this case, the customer, didn't want that, so we're just doing the basic stuff. Either way, clean it. It's a good idea to clean everything while you're in there. Now we just gotta, retract the piston inside the caliper. I'm using the snap-on tool for that, the caliper retracting tool. And as you can see, I'm gonna also clean out over here with the brake clean. I'm gonna clean inside, make sure you get all that gunk that's in there out. It's just always good to have clean parts. Things can get broken or damaged if you don't clean it. Especially the boot that covers the piston. So it's just a good idea always to have clean working parts. Now I'm putting on the new rotor in the back. I'm cleaning off that protective film, with some brake clean. Just always a good idea to have it cleaned out, because it's not necessarily going to possibly avoid the smoking or making noise, but it does help just in case. Not in all cases will it help. Now clean the front once again. You can tell those rotors look really nice. It's brand new rotors. Whenever you get something new, it's always looking nice. Now moving on to the bracket. I'm going to be cleaning it out with the brake clean. If possible, if you have a shop, or if you have something similar, a parts cleaner would do awesome job to clean that out, or some type of solution to clean the rust out. You can even take a brush, a wire brush, and really, brush out, a lot of the flakes of rust. If it's your own personal vehicle and you have the time for it, go ahead and do it. Now, I'm putting back the actual bracket by hand, just putting in the bolts and making sure that it's in there. Another tip that I picked up that might help you guys is if you put the rotor on and it's not necessarily staying on there, take 1 or 2 lug nuts and just thread them on by hand to make sure that the rotor's staying unstable, and it makes the process a lot easier. Once again, I'm cleaning again, and now I'm going to be putting in the metal brackets. They give you the sliding brackets for the pads, the brake pads. It's also a good idea when you have this time that you make sure that you compare the brake pads, make sure that either they're the same or were they being worn differently. Anything that can show you to possible maybe the caliper is messed up or something that would give you an idea that something is wrong. But in this case, everything's fine. I'm taking out the brackets over here, as you can see. I'm just gonna put them in, make sure that they're in. They should just fit right in. And if you want, even compare them to the previous ones. Different manufacturers make different types of brackets, but it's always good to compare them. Maybe it's the same ones, maybe you have different ones. I'm over here turning the rotor to make sure that there's no friction, it's not going to be touching anything, because the worst thing that you want is finishing the job, doing everything, and then you hit the road, and then you start hearing the metal on metal, and it's you're like, oh man, I gotta take the wheel back off, see what's going on, why is it rubbing. You always want to avoid that. Just take your time, do the job right one time around. Now I'm putting grease on the actual brake pads, making sure that on each side. You can also put a little bit of grease over here in the metal slides, just to make sure that it's gonna be greased. You don't want to overdo it either though, because if you put the brake pads and then the grease starts touching the actual rotor, you're gonna have problems with the braking. So just make sure you're careful. If you can use a little brush, sometimes if you buy the actual containers of grease, they'll come with a little brush applicator. In this case, the brake pads come with a packet of grease, and so we use that. I'm cleaning the actual brake pads because it looked like this one had a little bit of grease on it, so we're just making sure that we clean it off first. Now check in which direction the brake pads went in before. You don't want to put the brake pads on backwards, then you're gonna have a lot of problems. You're gonna have to take it off, and you're probably not gonna get the caliper on, but believe me, I've seen some weird things. I've seen people just force it on there and then they end up, breaking more things, having to do the job all over again. And you don't want to do that, especially if it's your car. Just, take a picture beforehand, before you're taking everything off. That way you have an idea. Or if you want, just come back and look at my video to see how I do it. Um, you know. So here I'm putting on the other brake pad. You always want to make sure that it slides in, that both sides are sliding. Because if they're not sliding, when the caliper is going to be pushing on them, they're just going to be glued on basically, and they're not going to move, and you might have performance issues as far as braking. Now I'm taking the pins out here, and I'm going to be cleaning them off. Get some brake clean, get a rag, make sure that take all that old grease or possibly dirt that's on there, and then you want to make sure you do this for both sides. Make sure they're clean, and you can see that there's rust actually on the back of this one, and you might, like I said, you might want to take a wire brush if you have the time. This is your car, make it a weekend project, and make sure you clean out everything really thoroughly. That way you won't be having to buy new parts, or getting the pins to get seized, especially during those moments where you want to have a long trip or use your car to have fun, and you're not braking, you're having problems. So in my case, I didn't have a wire brush, but I took a snap-on flathead screwdriver. If I'm not wrong, that's the number 2, and I'm just cleaning out the rust, making sure that I get as much as I can at the moment. And that's what I offer my customers, making sure that I can do the best job with what I have available, because I can't take the whole day to clean it out as thoroughly as I would want, but I do the best while I'm there. And in this case, it worked out well, because I got to get a lot of the rust that was on those sliding pins off, and I got to clean them out. So that's the important part. Now you're gonna see me over here putting on the actual dust boots. In the other tires, I ended up doing it differently. I ended up just deciding, let me put the pins onto the boots on the pins, and then putting the pins in carefully. I've seen it done both ways. You just want to do it in the way where it won't be coming out, because if it comes out, then you're gonna get debris in there, and that's all that effort that you did to clean it is not gonna be worth it. Also, make sure you remember which pins go where, because sometimes you have pins that are gonna be the same for both sides, and in certain cars and other cars you might have pins that, like, one has one's for the bottom, one's for the top, and you don't want to switch them up. So you see in here, when I push it in, I'm struggling a little bit, and I'm like, what, let me just put it in, a dust boot in first, and I'm going to try it again. It was giving me some trouble. That's why you always want to make sure you see what's best for your car. Your car might be easier to put the dust boot first on the sliding pin and then put it in, or the other way around. Another thing you might want to note is that when you're taking them off or putting them on, make sure that they're sliding. You can see here that I moved it in and out, making sure it was moving freely. Because if it's not moving freely, you might have debris in there, or it might be seized. And if that's the case, you're gonna have to heat it up and get it out, or might have to replace the whole bracket, which might mean in some cases getting a whole new caliper, because it comes together as one piece. But if you do that, you'll avoid headaches. Now the last part is just putting on the actual caliper. Push the pins back a little bit, put the caliper on. It should just sit right on. Sometimes it'll slide off maybe, so make sure you check, you have a hand on it. Another thing you might want to mention is make sure that the brake hose is smooth, that there's no kinks in the line, it's not cut, anything that could damage it. And when you're taking it off from the beginning, make sure that it's not dangling, because if it's dangling, you can potentially actually hurt the brake hose, and you're gonna have to change it. In this case, I'm making sure I put some brake clean. I had already put WD-40. You want to make sure everything's clean as well. And here now I'm just checking with a with a wrench to see if I can open up the bleeder screw. And you don't want to ever force this, because like I said earlier in the video, I've tried to force this, and it just wasn't happening. I put WD-40 at the beginning of the job, and it just wasn't coming loose, and ended up breaking it. Customer had to get a whole new caliper, and that's a headache, especially when you finish. So what I did in this case was put a little more WD-40, let it sit for a little bit, and then you can go take a break, get something to drink. And now I'm putting on a 10 millimeter deep impact socket, and slowly by hand with the ratchet pulling it. And I got it to break loose. If it is not breaking loose with a decent amount of effort, do not just leave it alone. You might have to heat it up, or you might have to let it sit a little bit more. And I wouldn't recommend heating anything up, because that is brake fluid, and it's potentially dangerous. So if it gets to that point, let it sit, give it more time. And at the moment, you might not need to bleed your brakes, but I'm doing it as a courtesy service for this customer. They're a returning customer, and I get along with them very well. So I got the bleeder loose. I tightened it, just hand snug, so that when I put the tire and I do the rest of the tires, I can bleed the brakes. And you see me over here putting on the lug nuts. I put them in a star pattern, giving just snugging them by hand, and with the gun just a little bit, and then don't ever tighten them just using the gun. You always want to make sure you use a torque wrench, which you're going to see me. You see me over here take the jack stand off, lower the vehicle, and now I'm bringing in my snap-on torque wrench. It's a 1/2 inch snap-on foot-pound torque wrench. You can get a fancy one. You can also find other ones that are cheaper. Just want to make sure that it's calibrated, and also you want to make sure that the specifications for your vehicle, usually they're in the owner's manual, or you can look them up online, for the amount of torque that the wheels need. The last thing you need is you did all this job, you're driving on the highway, and your wheels start coming off. And believe me, I've had customers who they've called me, and their wheels come off because they've taken its places, and it's just they didn't torque the wheels down, and that's something you don't want. You could mess up your car. You could have a lot of work to do after that, And now I'm moving on to the brake fluid exchange service, and I'm taking some brake cleaning the cap off, because you don't want to get any dirt that's into the brake fluid. In the case, you might have really clean brake fluid, because you're the type of person that gets it done according to the service of your vehicle, which would be awesome. But in this case, the customer hasn't gotten a brake fluid exchange in a long time, and there was actually debris in there. There was the fluid was like a brownish color, which is not good. You want it to be a very nice light amber type of color, like yellowish. And so I'm over here cleaning, making sure I get all the dirt that I can out, making sure that it's clean, and then I'm putting my finger into it to inspect it. I'm over here seeing that there's a lot of dirt in there, and I'm just making sure that I also don't get any brake fluid anywhere near the components of the vehicle, because brake fluid will damage the paint and damage other things on the vehicle. So now I'm going to show you guys. You can see it's not how brake fluid should look. Who knows when was the last time the customer actually did the service to it. I'm going to be cleaning out the little filter cap that it has. My lovely assistant, who also got dirty, as you can see with her shoes. They were white at one point. She's going to be pumping the brakes for me with the car off, and I'm going to be opening the bleeder screws, making sure that I get all the air out. And you'll know that because you'll see little bubbles coming out, and once you've done that, then you're good. In this case, the rear driver tire, the leader screw was actually it had dirt in it. It was clogged. So you can see I got a little nail. Cleaning it out, making sure air is going through. Preferably, you wouldn't want to do it with maybe running through some water through it, but at the moment I didn't have that, so just got it clean, installed it back in, and now we're going to turn the vehicle on and bleed the process again. Always, when you have your assistant, or if you're doing it with a compressed air tool to get to bleed the brakes, you always want to make sure you start with the wheel farthest from the master cylinder. So in most cases, it's the rear passenger wheel, and you always want to make sure that you check your owner's manual, because vehicles might do it a different order, but it's usually the one farthest from the master cylinder. I'm showing you guys now that the brake fluid is clean, it's clear, it's how it should be. Putting the cap back on, and now we're going to take it out for a test drive, make sure everything's fine. In this case, we were able to make sure the repair was done right. We drove it around the block, saw is the brake pedal holding, at stop signs and also at lights. Some hard stops, making sure that everything was working how it should be. Brought the windows down, making sure if there was any noises, and after that, just also being careful when taking the car out, because remember, it's not your own vehicle, it's a customer vehicle, so you want to make sure you do things right. This is the final result. You can see the new shiny rotor in the back. Everybody's going to be impressed, and they're going to love your car. And please give it a thumbs up, give it a like, subscribe if you like the content, or if you think any questions, any suggestions, just write to us. Also follow me on Instagram at galeanos.express.maintenance, and have a good one.